Sharpe's Revenge by Bernard Cornwell. Read by Rupert Farley. Part 1. Prologue. Major Richard Sharpe had made every preparation for his own death. His horse, Sycorax, and his fine French telescope would go to Captain William Frederickson. His weapons would become the property of Sergeant Patrick Harper, while everything else would belong to his wife, Jane. Everything, that was, except for the uniform in which Sharpe always fought. That uniform consisted of knee-high riding boots, French cavalry overalls, and a faded green jacket of the 95th Rifles. Sharpe had asked to be buried in that uniform. "If you weren't buried in those rags," Frederickson observed disdainfully, "they'd be burned anyway." It was true that the leather boots had been deeply scarred by knives, bayonets, and sabres, and that the overalls were so patched with brown homespun that they looked more like a ploughman's cast-off breeches than the plundered uniform of a chasseur colonel of Napoleon's Imperial Guard, and that the green jacket was so faded and threadbare that even a moth could not have made a decent meal from it. But the clothes were still those in which Sharpe fought, and were therefore dear to him. He might have looked like a scarecrow in the old uniform, but wearing it for battle was one of his obsessive superstitions, which was why, on a cold March morning in 1814, and despite being miles from any enemy soldier, Sharpe wore the old clothes. "You'll have to take off the jacket," Frederickson, who understood Sharpe's superstitious attachment to the uniform, warned his friend. "I know." There was no detail of this morning that Sharpe had not rehearsed again and again in his mind. What would happen this morning was called grass before breakfast. It sounded innocuous, but it could well mean death. The two men stood on a low, grassy bluff above a grey and sullen Atlantic. A long and heaving swell was running from the west to break against the rocks beneath. To the north of the bluff was the French port of Saint-Jean-de-Luz, that was crammed with merchant shipping and fishing boats, while in the harbour's outer roads a small Royal Navy flotilla lay at anchor. The flotilla consisted of 3 sloops, 2 frigates, and a great chequer-sided battleship, the Vengeance. It was a shivering dawn, yet spring was coming, and with the spring would come a resurgence of battle. The Emperor Napoleon had refused the peace terms offered by his enemies, so now the French armies would have to fight to defend their homeland. Their enemies were now all Europe. Wellington's army of Britons, Spaniards, and Portuguese had captured the southwestern corner of France, and would soon strike yet further into the heartland, while far to the north the Prussians, Austrians, and Russians skirmished across Napoleon's northern frontiers. None of which seemed immediately important to Major Richard Sharpe, as he began to pace the frosted grass on the bluff's flat summit. A cold wind was gusting from the ocean, and William Frederickson took shelter from it in the lee of some bent and stunted pines. Sharpe, pacing up and down, was oblivious of the wind, obsessed instead with the thought of his own death. The most important thing, he decided, was that Jane was well taken care of. She already had the piece of paper which gave her authority over Sharpe's money, which money was the profit of the plunder he had taken from the French baggage after the Battle of Vittoria. Many soldiers had become rich that day, but few as rich as Major Richard Sharpe or Sergeant Patrick Harper. Sharpe paced close to Frederickson. "Time?" Frederickson fumbled with gloved hands to open his watch's lid. 20 minutes past 6. Sharpe grunted and turned away. The dawn had made the grey clouds palely luminous, while the sea was so dark that it seemed to be made of a liquid and sluggish slate. A small, high-prowed fishing boat was perilously close to the rocks beneath Sharpe. The fishermen were heaving lobster pots overboard. Perhaps, Sharpe thought, his enemy would be eating one of the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?